Welcome to Delta Wings Aviation Academy, where we prepare you for takeoff.
Hello, pilots. Welcome back to Delta Wing Aviation Academy, where we prepare you for takeoff. In today's regulation-focused lesson from our Private Pilot series, we'll continue building your foundation in the Private Pilot Airman Certification Standards, ACS. Let's move forward into another important area of aircraft regulations. Today we'll begin with Task B, Airworthiness Requirements. In this lesson, we'll focus on PA.I.B.K3c, Kinds of Operation Equipment List, KOEL. Before we begin, keep in mind that important FAA regulations and references will appear on screen throughout the video. Feel free to pause, take notes, or capture screenshots for later review. As always, we'll break everything down step by step using simple explanations, real-world pilot scenarios, checkride-focused understanding, so you can confidently apply this knowledge during training, oral exams, and real flight operations. And if you're short on time, stay with us until the end, where we'll summarize everything in a quick and easy revision format. All right, pilots, let's begin. Today's video lesson is about the Kinds of Operation Equipment List, commonly called the KOEL. We'll first understand what the Kinds of Operation Equipment List is, why pilots use it, where to find it, and how it helps determine if an aircraft is airworthy for a specific flight. So first, what exactly is a Kinds of Operation Equipment List?
The Kinds of Operation Equipment List is exactly what the name sounds like. It's the list telling us what's required for specific operations. In other words, certain equipment may only be required during certain types of operations.
For example, equipment required for day VFR, equipment required for night VFR, equipment required for IFR operations. Let's move on and look at some examples. A KOEL may specify whether equipment is required for day VFR operations, night VFR operations, IFR operations, icing conditions, extended overwater flights. For example, a landing light may not be required for a daytime private flight, but it becomes required if the aircraft is operated for hire at night. Position lights are required for night operations. Certain gyroscopic instruments are required for IFR flight. So the KOEL helps pilots determine, can this aircraft legally operate for this type of flight? That's one of the major purposes of the Kinds of Operation Equipment List. Now let's continue with an important point for checkride.
So the KOEL is also used during the process of determining whether an aircraft with inoperative equipment is still airworthy.
If a piece of equipment stops working, pilots must determine, is the equipment required? Is the flight operation still legal? Can the flight continue safely? The KOEL helps answer those questions. For example, if a rotating beacon fails during a planned daytime VFR flight, the pilot may check FAR 91-205, the aircraft's KOEL, the POH limitations, any applicable ADs or MEL.
If the equipment is not required for that specific operation, the aircraft may still be legal to fly after proper deactivation or placarding procedures.
We'll move next into another important distinction that students often confuse. KOEL versus MEL. Know the difference. Many pilots confuse the KOEL with the MEL, but they are different documents. The KOEL specifies what equipment is required for certain operations, is usually part of the POH or AFM, is provided by the aircraft manufacturer, applies to that aircraft model. The Minimum Equipment List, or MEL, is FAA approved, allows operation with certain inoperative equipment, is more commonly used in larger or commercial aircraft. An aircraft may have a KOEL even if it does not have an MEL. That's an important checkride point. Let's continue and look at where pilots normally find the KOEL. The KOEL is typically published by the aircraft manufacturer as part of the limitation section of the AFM or within the POH. However, there is no single required format. Different manufacturers may present KOEL information differently. For example, Some aircraft place it in the limitation section, others include it in supplements. Some may use tables or operational notes.
So during pre-flight planning, pilots should always know where to locate operational equipment requirements in their specific aircraft documentation.
Real-world pilot example. Let's look at a practical scenario. You arrive at the aircraft for a daytime VFR flight and notice the strobe lights are inoperative. Now the pilot must determine, are strobe lights required for this operation? Does the KOEL require them for day VFR? Does FAR 91205 require them? Is there an MEL? Can the aircraft still be legally operated? This is exactly how KOEL knowledge is applied in real-world operations.
And this is the type of practical decision-making FAA examiners expect during check rides.
FAA references to know. For check rides and written exams, remember these important references. FAR 91-205, FAR 91-213, Advisory Circular 9167, POH and AFM Limitation Section, KOEL, MEL if applicable.
These references work together when determining aircraft airworthiness with inoperative equipment.
Wrap-up summary. All right, pilots, before we finish, let's quickly review the kinds of operation equipment list, KOEL. The KOEL specifies which equipment is required for different types of flight operations. Examples include day VFR, night VFR, IFR operations. The KOEL helps determine whether an aircraft with inoperative equipment is still airworthy. The KOEL is usually found in the aircraft, POH or AFM limitation section. The KOEL is different from the MEL. KOEL is operational equipment requirements. MEL is FAA approved authorization to operate with certain inoperative equipment. Pilots use the KOEL along with FAR 91-205, FAR 91-213, POH limitations, airworthiness requirements. That's the key knowledge FAA examiners expect private pilots to understand. Checkride-style oral scenarios. All right, pilots, now let's finish with some realistic checkride-style oral scenarios similar to what a DPE may ask during your FAA practical test. Scenario 1, burned out landing light. DPE question. You're preparing for a daytime VFR flight in a small training aircraft. During pre-flight, you discover the landing light is burned out. Can you legally fly? Pilot answer. First, I would check whether the aircraft has an MEL. If no MEL exists, I would follow FAR 91-213D procedures and determine whether the landing light is required by FAR 91.205, the KOEL, the POH, or AFM, NEADs. Since this is a daytime VFR flight and not for hire, the landing light may not be required. If it's not required, the light can be deactivated or placarded inoperative, and the aircraft may still be airworthy. Scenario 2, failed position light. DPE. Question, you plan to depart at night, but the left position light is inoperative. Can you fly? Pilot answer, no. Position lights are required equipment for night operations under FAR 91-205. The KOEL would also normally require them for night VFR operations. Since the aircraft would not meet required equipment regulations, the flight could not legally depart at night until repaired or properly authorized under an MEL if applicable. Scenario 3, inoperative attitude indicator. DPE. Question, during pre-flight for an IFR flight, you notice the attitude indicator is not functioning. What would you do? Pilot answer, for IFR operations, the attitude indicator is required under FAR 91-205 for powered aircraft. I would verify requirements in the KOEL and POH, but without a functioning attitude indicator, the aircraft would not be legal for IFR flight unless operating under an approved MEL authorization. Scenario 4, rotating beacon failure. DPE. Question, the rotating beacon fails before a daytime VFR flight. Is the aircraft airworthy? Pilot answer, I would check the KOEL, FAR 91, 205 in the aircraft documents. For daytime VFR operations, the rotating beacon may not be required equipment. If it's not required by regulation, KOEL, AD, or POH, the aircraft could still be operated after the beacon is properly deactivated or placarded inoperative, according to FAR 91, 213. Scenario 5, KOEL location, DPE. Question, where would you normally find the KOEL in your aircraft documentation? Pilot answer, the KOEL is usually found in the limitations section of the POH or AFM. However, manufacturers may present the information in different formats or supplements depending on the aircraft. Scenario 6, KOEL versus MEL, DPE. Question, what is the difference between a KOEL and an MEL? Pilot answer, the KOEL identifies which equipment is required for specific operations like day VFR, night VFR, or IFR. The MEL is an FAA-approved document that allows operation with certain inoperative equipment under specific conditions. Thanks for watching today's video on kinds of operation equipment lists for private and commercial pilots. If this helped you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us continue creating clear, FAA-accurate aviation education. Fly safe, and I'll see you in the next video.